Good, again, good afternoon here in Rome, and good morning in Latin America, good evening in Asia. I'm Andrei Kushlin, coordinator for the Forestry Technical Network, and we are starting our first event of the Forestry Technical Network series this year, and it's been very gently volunteered by Peter Csoka to serve as the provider of the very important theme for our first such event, and that's the official announcement was bracing for impact, but the informal topic was everything you wanted to know about COFO but were afraid to ask. So, we have 1 hour, and we are actually testing this format in a number of ways. Both in terms of whether the timing is actually convenient for people, both here in Rome and in the field offices, also how the connection works, and making really sure that we have an interactive session, not just someone talking down to everyone else. So without much ado, our dear esteemed Sir Peter, can I please ask you to take the floor here and run the session. But again, is there any way for us to still kind of check that people can, those who are connected by remote,
they confirm they can hear.
They can hear, but can anyone say something so that we know that we can hear them?
We checked, Magnus could...
Oh, here in RLS6, Jorge Mesa and Ivy Ortiz.
Jorge Mesa.
Oh, hi Jorge, good morning. Great, great. Okay, so we can hear you, now we can proceed, and again, there's so much, all about interaction, so Peter will of course be driving the interactive, both the substantive and interactive part of the process. Okay. So Peter, over to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Andre and colleagues. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody connected through Skype and also here. Frankly, I was expecting a little bit bigger excitement on the newcomer colleagues' side, and some of the presentation is intended for them, so maybe it is kind of boring for some of you, especially for the older hands, because the first part is about how the governance machinery of FAO is working, because sometimes it's not entirely clear, and then sometimes not even clear even for myself, even if I try to explain this. But why we are having these different governing body sessions and what is the implication of the outcome of them, this is something that is a recurrent question, so I thought to talk a little bit about that. Just briefly explaining that FAO, as any other UN system organization, is actually a membership-driven organization, and why the operational management responsibility is with the Director General, the guidance to the organization is coming through the various bodies. And then these articles that you see on the screen are actually referring to the different articles of the FAO Constitution under which these bodies were created. And on the top of the hierarchy is obviously the FAO conference. The specialized agencies have a very similar but independent structure of the United Nations, which means the United Nations Secretariat. So what is the conference for us is actually the General Assembly for the United Nations. And then the bodies below are also kind of equivalent to some UN bodies there. The conference, which meets once in every biennium, is taking key decisions on all the policy and programmatic issues of the organization. And from its powers, the regional conferences under Article 4 derive their own powers. They are also meeting once in every biennium. And because this meeting frequency is not very high, there is another body which means more frequently, and this is the FAO Council, while in the conference the full membership is represented, the council is based on election, and the seat in the council is given to one country for 3 years, and then there is a rotation there. The council meets 3 times in the year of the conference meeting, and twice in every other years. And the council is supported by several committees. They are also called the council committees, also established under Article 5. And one is the program committee, the other one is the finance committee. These are meeting more frequently, more or less twice a year, that is 4 times per biennium. Same applies to the Committee on Constitutional and Legal Matters. And then there are the technical committees, the Committee on Commodity Problems, Committee of Agriculture, Committee of Fisheries, and Committee on Forestry. These are again meeting once in every biennium. And then there are a larger number of bodies under Article 6, which are different kind of commissions, committees, working groups, etc. From our perspective, the regional forestry commissions are all belonging to Article 6, and so does, or so is the Advisory Committee on Sustainable Forest-Based Industries and the Silva Mediterranea. These bodies are normally meeting once per biennium, except, for example, the ACSFI, which is meeting on an annual basis. And then while SilvaMed is also on a biennial body, in the recent years they had several extraordinary meetings, so this was pretty much annual. And then finally there is an interesting category, which is Article 14. This is the conventions and agreements. These are actually bodies that were not established originally under the FAO Constitution, but negotiated externally and were brought to FAO for servicing or hosting. In our case, this applies to the International Popular Commission. This is the only global body with a legal basis, although its thematic scope is relatively limited. The ICP has its sessions once in every 4 years. An important thing to note in relation to the Article 14 bodies that their participation from the organization financial resources are limited, and oftentimes they are serviced by the voluntary contributions of their members and as any other treaties. And they have a certain amount of independence because they are reporting to their own governing bodies, but certainly those governing bodies are reporting also to the FAO Council if they are regional, and to the FAO Conference if they are global. While forestry has only one, if you look at the fisheries website, you see that there are several Article 14 bodies there, the regional tuna conventions and others, they are all Article 14. So there was a big reform started in FAO many years ago, and it was a lengthy process, but as a result, this governing structure was established under which there is a certain reporting mechanism through which different decisions and recommendations are taken finally to the top level, which is the conference. And starting from the regions, there are the regional bodies, in our case the regional forestry commissions, who are providing input on 2 channels. One is taken to the regional conferences, and the other one is to the respective technical committees. The regional conferences and the technical committees making recommendations on programmatic and budgetary matters to the FAO Council, while on policy matters to the FAO Conference. And certainly the programmatic and budgetary matters are also taken finally to the conference for decision. There is one body in the machinery which is a little bit unique. This is the Committee on World Food Security, because this is not only a FAO body, this is a joint body with the Csoka, and therefore they have 2 different reporting lines. What is important to note in this dual track of technical committees and regional conferences is that while the technical committees have a very clear thematic focus, and as such they could be considered as vertical structures, The regional conferences are horizontal. As I said, they are deriving their powers from the conference, so they are playing very similar role in the regional level than what the conference does on the global level. So for this reason, for example, when a recommendation by any forestry commission made on certain aspects, this is important that it's taken not only to COFO, because COFO certainly will promote that, but COFO will promote the fisheries recommendations and COAG will promote the agriculture recommendations. It's also very important that there is a regional coordination at the level of the regional conferences, and priorities are established there as well. And this is why the Council is benefiting from these two inputs. And the other committees, the Program and Finance committees and the CCLM, they are certainly advising the Council in either programmatic or budgetary or legal matters, so that their decisions are entirely in line with any existing regulation and treaties or agreements or the whole basic texts. The priority setting exercise is a rather long procedure, and this is something that takes a really long time, and sometimes it's not even entirely clear for everybody what exactly the implication of a recommendation by a certain session of COFO and how is it channeled finally into the programs and policies of the organization. So if we consider that there is a conference in a certain year, the next one will be in 2019, the last one was in 2017, the conference takes two very important programmatic decisions. One is on the medium-term program of work, which is a 4-year program, and that contains 2 biennia, so then at the same time the conference is always taking a decision on the program of the next biennium. So then in this case, if it is in year X, then it's the coming 5 years, X plus 1 to X plus 4, and X1, X2 is the program of work on budget. So how is it built up then? It means that if a regional forestry commission meets 2 years before the conference, if we are talking about the 19, then in this case that was last year, most of them except Africa have already met, and they are making recommendations in 2 directions. One is refining the priorities for the current biennium, and the other one is recommendations for actions for the future for the whole organization. And then these recommendations are taken to the different regional conferences, which are always meeting in the spring of the next year, but this is 1 year before the conference, and they are taking decisions on all kinds of priorities for the biennium and beyond. Then in the same spring, this is normally April, May, the Council meets. Anything that the Council is discussing in this regard is seen before that by the Program and Finance committees. They are also considering the implementation of the ongoing biennium. This PIR is the Program Implementation Report. And they consider what input they are getting from the regional conferences. Then after that, the technical committees meet. In this case, and in this year, this will be in the period of July, October, and then they will be, like in case of COFO, receiving the input for the regional commissions. They are discussing those recommendations, digest it, translate it to the global scale, and then they also make recommendations for the conference, which is the next biennium. So we are 1 year before, but we are talking about something that starts 2 years later. And then all these recommendations are taken to the Council, which is normally in December or the very end of October, again preceded by Program and Finance committees. So they, in the Council, they review all these recommendations and give guidance for the organization to prepare the plans for the coming period. And then in the following year, in the spring, again, this is sometimes around April, they will look at all these recommendations, be it about the new MTP or the new PWB, and make them final for the conference to decide in the summer month, June or July of that year. So this is how it goes through the system. So anything that was said by the regional forestry commissions last fall is something that feeds through this channel to the program of work and budget of 2020-2021, because the current biennium is 18-19. So this is a rather lengthy process, of course, and there's a need for a lot of foresight here. Certainly some of the recommendations that these bodies are making have direct implications on the implementation of the ongoing program of work and budget, and this is why many of you may recall that we regularly circulate these inventory type tables where all the recommendations of the COFO are listed, and you are requested to inform about the actions that have been taken in response to those recommendations. So this is fine-tuning the ongoing program and setting the long-term priorities, and the long-term priorities are translated into budgets through this relatively lengthy process. And then one more thing that was introduced some years ago in relation to the regional forestry commissions, and that was after 2010, that in order to make better impact and helping to get the messages across the system I just explained, there was a coordination mechanism set or established by which the regional forestry commissions are making recommendations in a certain format, and they hand it over to the following commission. So then commission number one, in this case, that was North America. They made a couple of recommendations that was taken to Latin America, and they expanded the list, handed over to Europe and then Asia Pacific, etc. So towards the end, there are several cross-referencing and several regions suggesting the same or very similar actions or strategies or focus areas. And of course, they are amending with their own. So that's why I said that in the current set, we have 31 individual recommendations. Some of them were supported by 4 or 5 commissions, others are just one, but still this is a very long and comprehensive list. But by this coordination, we were able to achieve better synergies and ensure that potentially these messages are reaching the final destination, not only through COFO, but also to some extent through the regional conferences. Then one more word about, and the colleagues in the region could talk more about this, about how these recommendations are taken into consideration. It's an ongoing and continued challenge in case of the regional conferences, because in most of the cases they are having as an agenda item an information item report from the regional technical commissions, but it does not necessarily mean that there is a thorough or in-depth discussion of those items. This is an information document that is taken into consideration, but to what extent discussed, that depends. And then sometimes there is a specific agenda item dealing with forests. There are big differences here, because in the Asia-Pacific region over the last 2 rounds, there was pretty much nothing, not even an information item regarding forests. Whereas, for example, in Europe, the report of the Commission is a standing agenda item since the decision in 2013, meaning that it's not an information document, but it's a formal discussion item. And this is, as I said, because this is a horizontal body with several program and problem areas, this is very difficult to place forestry to the level of recognition where otherwise we would like to see it. It's different in case of COFO, because for COFO, the input from the regional commissions is very important. The agenda is overwhelmingly based on their recommendations, and also those recommendations constitute the backbone for the program priorities document. So in COFO, they have certainly much bigger impact than in the regional conferences. Actually, during COFO, there is always a meeting of the bureaus of the regional forestry commissions. It's normally on Monday evening, and this is a recurrent item: how to take the recommendations to the attention, or bring to the attention of the regional conference. Okay, so moving to COFO from here, that as the departmental meeting, it was mentioned that because of a number of reasons, the conference decision, the COFO, etc., it was agreed that the focus of this session should be on the SDGs. This time not that much on a conceptual level, but more from the perspective of the implementation and then the ways to enhance and accelerate this implementation. I also mentioned that we were looking for a good slogan for the session, and we were not very successful to invent something so far. So we suggested that you provide recommendations in this regard. We already got 4, and some are looking really good, so I would really like to encourage everybody to contribute to this. I was invited to identify a price, but I have no idea, frankly, what would work as a motivating thing, so I'm open to recommendations in this regard as well. Andre has a great idea. I forgot to mention that any idea should come with identification of the funding sources for that. No, this is seriously any idea for both the slogan and the prize is just more than welcome. Okay, we also spoke about this a little bit, that there are several items on the agenda that are kind of preset, because these were mostly agreed by the multi-year program of work. And then what are non-procedural here is really the COFO, the progress reports, the dialogue with statutory bodies, and in the program priorities document. The others are standard housekeeping type items. But we were also requested by the conference to discuss climate change as a biennial theme, and the biodiversity mainstreaming together with all other technical committees. Then, because this was our desire to have CFS once considering forestry, and it happened at the last session, there was a request that the outcome of the CFS is then taken to COFO for further consideration. The SDGs we spoke about, and then there are 2 other obligations arising from COFO's own decision. One is the consideration of how to enhance the work on the temperate and boreal forests, and then develop a new strategic document for forestry in COFO. So this is a pretty dense agenda with lots of items, and there is not much flexibility really to recommend additional items. The challenge here really is how to create meaningful documents for these that are neither trying to tell too much or too little, and allow for a good and informed discussion on the really important and strategic issues. So while we don't have that much flexibility there are a couple of interesting things around the session. One is the program of the week. This is certainly taken from last year, because we have nothing like that for this year yet. But what is important that we have in the course of the week, not only intergovernmental negotiations, but a couple of more interactive events or more entertaining, if you like. One is the opening ceremony. The other one is these panels that were decided by the steering committee to introduce at the beginning of the program. And then we always keep a big slot free on Friday morning. The opening session, it's normally attended on a very high level and from areas which are constituting the main discussion items during the agenda. It was also agreed that we should have a ministerial level panel, and the steering committee on Monday agreed to this. Ministerial level in that sense that preferably the countries who are chairing the regional forestry commissions would be represented in this panel on the minister or vice minister level. The reason behind is that in this way the selection of the countries is totally neutral, because it is based on their involvement in the work of the regional forestry commissions. The steering committee on Monday also suggested that urban forestry in this year, urban and peri-urban forestry in this year is very important, so they saw the reason for that becoming the subject of the second dialogue. That doesn't have to be ministerial, certainly, but there we have lots of flexibility to come up with an interesting and encouraging program. And again, for Friday, where we have this whole morning slot, 2 rooms with full services, and this is the time when the report is compiled, finalized, and printed, that we need to provide some good programs, heavy items that would merit from big attendance and big attention. So again, this is a call for everybody to make recommendations in this regard. What would be good candidates for keeping colleagues happy about being part of this event here. So that applies to those 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. That is the formal COFO session. But we, together with COFO, always have something which is called the World Forest Week. And this is a home of a multitude of events that are happening either because they are closely related to the agenda or because the presence of so many experts from all over the world provides a great opportunity for that. Again, this is just an example taken from last year, and illustrating that there were a really high number of events outside the COFO session hours, meaning the mornings, the lunch breaks, and the evenings. Tuesday evening is always reserved for a reception, so that is, it is discouraged to recommend something for that. But in the remaining part, there are ample opportunities to organize events. We normally are very flexible about events that are organized on the occasion but unrelated to COFO, like the meetings of the steering committees or executive committees of regional forestry commissions and other bodies which are meeting because the colleagues are here. But certainly more attention is paid to the events that are recommended to support the COFO discussions. Here we have to, while it is an invitation for everybody to recommend events in this regard, we should also be mindful that this should not be destructive. So these should support the discussion to the extent possible, shedding more light on the technical side of some of the questions. And certainly they should not be so much that they would be more of a distraction than support. So when these recommendations are finally made, there is a need for a careful weighing and judging which one could finally be organized and which is kind of discouraged. But again, this will be communicated to everybody, including our external partners, to make recommendations in this regard. I also mentioned at the departmental meeting that combining efforts and teaming up with other agencies or member countries is always helpful. One thing that you need to know that these are normally without interpretation. So if you are willing to have it with interpretation, there's a fair chance that that would come at a price, and the COFO Secretariat is not able to cover those price tags. We can provide services as much as the uncommitted time of the interpretation teams are available, but if additional services are needed, that needs to be paid for, and the same applies to catering and any other arrangement that might be necessary. Okay, so then where and what could the contribution be in addition to working for the sessions themselves, the side and satellite events that I was talking about? One big challenge is always the atrium, which we can use in that week, and normally in the past we were able to organize interesting and exciting things there, content-wise and visually interesting things. We used to have exhibits there. We used to have, at one occasion, we tried a share fair kind of exercise there. So again, this is an invitation and encouragement to everybody to come up with ideas how that space could best be used to promote the issues we are willing to talk about, and certainly to promote and share information about our work. That includes the distribution of publications. Normally we try to distribute as many of the existing printed publications as possible. Some are even launched during COFO, like COFO, for example. And we always provide, always means in the last several years we have been providing a pen drive, which actually is a collection of several things, including the full COFO documentation, but all the electronically available publication that you recommend for this purpose. And this is coming with a sort of a navigation platform as well, so it's not just a collection of files, it's a little bit more organized than that, and colleagues normally appreciate that. So for the content of this pen drive, again, there will be a call released, and you will be kindly requested to make recommendations on in this regard. Okay, so then now we are close to finalizing the agenda based on the guidance we got on Monday from the steering committee, and then once the steering committee agrees, then there is this relatively longer clearance process starts in the House. But at the same time, there will be a request sent to all the authors of these documents that are intended for the sessions and session organizers to prepare plans explaining what exactly the rationale, the focus, and the outcome, and what supporting documentation is needed for the different sessions, and then develop write the documents themselves. This is pretty much the same thing as it is happening in connection with the regional commission sessions, and certainly take care of the organization, inviting speakers, etc. So anything that is needed to have a successful session. This affects a limited number of colleagues from the department, certainly, but as I said, these calls for making recommendations either for events or publications, etc., this is something that is an open call to everybody. And as we are getting closer to the event itself, there will be a need for more and more helping hands, especially in the week before and during the event, for taking care of several rather pedestrian, still extremely important things, and here we heavily count on many of you, and especially the young colleagues. They are very much encouraged to come, and although this is a little bit trying sometimes time-wise, but this is very important. It's a good opportunity also for them to see what's going behind the scene. I don't know, Dominic, if you are willing to tell a couple of words about what the volunteers could do for us during the week.
Yes, good afternoon. So volunteers are always essential for the good running of COFO. We had for the last COFO about 20 volunteers. It's when we got some feedback from them after the sessions, they all reported that it was a great opportunity to do something different from their normal duties, and to also do some networking because they are close to the delegates. There are different tasks for which we need the help of the volunteers. The volunteers can be called for ad hoc translations, when sometimes we receive documents or letters or requests for information in Arabic, in Chinese, in Brazilian, in Portuguese, and so it's good to have some colleagues who can help us very quickly. We also need protocol aids sometimes, depending on the participation, the level of participation. We had at the last COFO some high-level participants for whom some assistance was needed to take them around the organization, sometimes to have some meetings, to take them to the office of the Director General, or also to guide them during the session. We also need some secretarial and administrative support. Support at the documents desk, support at the publication display that Peter mentioned earlier. Last time we had, as you may know, maybe the newcomers will learn about it, we had a special setting for a kind of TV show setting, and we needed some studio assistants and some assistants of cameramen. So there are lots of opportunities to help during COFO. We have also the registration desk. And we usually make a call for volunteers some months before the session. This time we may do it around April so that volunteers can plan also for their summer holidays and let us know about their availabilities. We have tasks starting maybe from April, but most of the tasks will be mostly during the first week, the week preceding the session, during the session, and maybe on the last day, the last evening after the session. So that's about all that okay.
Thank you, Dominique. And needless to say that this helping hand thing is something that applies more to colleagues here in headquarters, but everything else regarding events, publications, atrium use, etc., is also a call to colleagues in the decentralized offices. And then I have to note that in particular the secretaries of the regional forestry commissions are playing a very important role during the week, because they are supporting the steering committee during the week, which meets every day to wrap up and decide on the next steps. So colleagues are always contributing to those discussions. And then, as I mentioned, this meeting of the bureaus of the regional forestry commissions, this is always organized by one of the secretaries. I don't remember exactly, but I recall that the last one was I think organized by Abdel Hamid. So then again I will tell you who is the next one who has the privilege of organizing this session for this year. So then in this way the contribution of the colleagues is kind of a daily task during COFO itself. So in addition to, again, calling for volunteers, I think just very briefly what we need to recall is really the same days that were used at the departmental meeting. So once the agenda is developed and presented for approval to the Director General, there is a very intense period of preparing the documentation, and then we need to make sure that the session is announced 3 months in advance of the date, that is 16th of April, and we need to make sure that all the documents are ready in all 6 languages not later than 1 month in advance of the session. And this is very challenging, involving only a few colleagues or lesser number of colleagues, but all these logistical preparations, as Dominique mentioned, are taking place in a much longer period, since from April till pretty much the session itself. So this would have been the summary that we thought to bring as an information piece to your attention. And then now, if there is any question, then we can have a quick discussion now, and certainly discussion should continue as we are proceeding towards the event itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter and Dominique. So if this was the summary, you know, one can imagine what's the full subject matter description. Anyway, this was certainly immensely packed with information and facts, and now we are also kind of testing that things are being recorded for posterity, and people who are not connected now can look kind of frame by frame, you know, the delivery of Peter and Dominique later on. And certainly we also need to make sure that currently we have 18 minutes in accordance with our current allotted time for questions and answers, and that will certainly not be enough, I mean, for sure. So we shall also make an arrangement and a commitment that the follow-up questions will also be submitted by email, and once we have that online forum, those could be also posted online. But for now, Peter and Dominic, I think one of the comments you may want to make up front is how would you, in the current available kind of techniques we have, the questions that will not be answered now, how would you want to receive those additional questions, which I'm sure will be many? You can maybe comment on that at some point, but otherwise, I'm opening it up for questions both here in Rome for people here, but very importantly for people who are listening to us and watching us in the decentralized offices. Is there a way for us to actually see who is there and monitor how they want to raise their hands to ask questions? So anyway, so while maybe Christian, you could sort out how our remote connectors can flag, but we have the first question here from the floor. So,
so a brief question on governance. You said that the regional forestry commissions passed their recommendations both through the regional conferences and through the Committee on Forestry towards FAO. So what happens if, say, a regional conference doesn't pick up a suggestion, but then it gets picked up in COFO or the other way around? Does this happen, and does this lead to problems, or how do you solve that?
Yes, this is happening oftentimes, and this is why I stress in particular the difference between COFO and the regional conferences, that sometimes this is an uphill battle, and certainly if there was no agenda item in the Asia-Pacific region, there was no recommendation from the Asia-Pacific Regional Conference regarding forestry. And this is why this parallel track is that even if there is no recommendations coming from the region, then COFO can take that recommendation to council and through it to conference. So it does not mean that if one way is blocked, then there is no way to have the message there. Why I mentioned this difference between the two bodies is that if I want to simplify, the technical committees are normally telling that their work is important, because it would be stupid to expect that the forestry will start talking about how important fisheries work is, and the fisheries guys will think, no, we are not important, give the money to forestry. It's not going to happen. But because everybody is promoting on course for a good reason, that's why the supporting recommendation from the regional conference, where the consideration is pretty much horizontal, that has an additional value, but the two are not kind of mutually exclusive tracks. And that's why we always try to work towards having some recognition to the forest issues there. Thanks God, we all get the regional conference documentation for technical clearance, and if not elsewhere there, we can always stress and emphasize this, and thanks to the secretaries of the regional conferences, these recommendations are in most of the cases taken into consideration.
I guess my question would be, being put on the spot and not having something on top of my head, when reaching out to our key, for example, CPF partners, knowing that there's certain outputs being delivered, such as the GFEP report on forests and water, how are we liaising with them to ensure that these materials are also represented in COFO?
I mean, in particular, with the GFAP, we had a good history of collaboration. In this one, we are very much there. We hosted the scoping meeting for this study, and then you, Eileen, are contributing to this quite a bit. When I was talking about this Friday slot, we already used this. We already used it once. And gave it to UNFAO or CPF, GFAP to present the study on that. So I kind of am hoping that that would be one of the options that we can consider this time, because it's indeed a pretty big audience and high visibility, and those studies are normally of high quality, so it's a good match, win-win situation. I haven't heard from either the UNFAO Secretariat or anybody else, but I'm kind of expecting that to come.
Further questions?
take your invitation at the beginning to things you wanted to know, but you never had the opportunity to ask. So my question is, huh? I was afraid to ask. So my question is, do we know what happens to these decisions that are made in COFO? What kind of impact they have in the countries, in global governance, in what do they translate to? I think it would be very helpful to know that something that was decided from the regions come to COFO, and I don't know, it turns into SDG, or it turns into a global fund, or it turns, you know, is there a way of tracking actually after COFO what happens to this very well thought through process of consultation and deliberation?
Yes, I mean, there are two different, I should have said that at the very beginning. There are two very different kind of outcomes from COFO and all the governing bodies. One is related to the work of the organization. I was focusing mostly on that program of work and budget priorities, etc. But that is not the sole purpose of these bodies. The other and maybe more important purpose is that there is an opportunity for the countries to talk to each other and agree on certain actions that they implement, or at least try to implement or use in their own national policy and strategy setting as a sort of a result of the collective wisdom of the global or regional community. We have a very systematic review of how the action recommendations are followed up on and what is happening, what is taken into account. Certainly it is also monitored what is finally making its way to the final PWB documents, and then when we need to provide a mandate for any action recommendation from our side, these are the sources of mandate there. We have a little bit less systematic overview of what is happening to the policy recommendations. For many years there was a system of national reports where countries informed about their actions. This is mostly done in the regional forestry commissions now, not in all of them, but at least 3 of them are still having this system. Others discontinued doing this in the name of decreasing the reporting burden on countries. But one clear indication is the discussion in the commissions, because there is always a looking back, and the countries, when they are making recommendations, they also refer to the past, and sometimes you see that items appearing on consecutive agendas. And it's not because people have no innovative ideas, it's because the solution is still not there, and there is a need for a continued discussion on that. But the systematic follow-up on actions related to the recommendations addressed to the countries, this is not taking place. It's up to the countries to express satisfaction, inform about success, or inform about lack of success or dissatisfaction.
Further questions? Again. Guys, in the decentralized offices, we need to hear what you are worrying about this. We all expect that certainly some of you, if not most of you, will be coming, or many of you will be coming here for COFO and for the FTN days afterwards. So we need you to be really fully involved. So and maybe while we're still seeing if the field is ready to field the questions, sorry for the repetition of words, just to voice what I had as an idea of what would be the incentive for the best slogan for COFO. And it will cost you nothing, maybe a cup of coffee. Whoever would be the winner, the pronounced winner, could be invited at the opening plenary to actually pronounce the slogan, and then everyone will recognize that person as the author of the slogan.
This is not an expensive proposal, I agree.
Well, unless it's someone coming from, I don't know, from the Papua New Guinea office, and you'll have to fly them here. Okay, questions from this room while the field is still waking up, or? I'm going to call the back door. Safia, ask a question. There is a price to pay for sitting in the back row. Okay. Mitsugi-san, do you have a question?
Even to me that I attended the steering committee this Monday, I cannot make question, but well, also this is quite a good opportunity relating to that. So, what is the COFO outcome can contribute the forestry of the world? Actually, that each country has very much acquired what happened in the world. At the same time, maybe we may just offer another opportunities to talk about the issue of forestry. So this time, Peter does not mention the side event, but probably not only that this is the mainstreaming of the discussion, also maybe how just making the quite good ideas of the side event also can also stimulate our further discussions.
Thank you, Hiroto. Okay, just again, I keep asking our country-level colleagues if they have a question, and while they're still thinking about it, Ilyas, you have your mic.
Sorry, no, this is a very practical question. One is how you are planning to avoid the overcrowding of this World Forest Week event. Sometimes it is, too many events. And the other is how we can make this delivery of the presentations a bit more innovative in the COFO itself.
I didn't get the second one.
To make the presentations in the COFO main session a bit more innovative, delivery. Yeah, or even the both, but even the COFO sessions, what is the freedom we have to make it a bit more innovative?
I mean, the side events, yes, the recommendations are oftentimes at the end we see too many, and there is a need for a selection, and somebody needs to be the bad guy. So it's unavoidable. It's good that we have a hierarchy in the department. So finally, there is a candidate who could be the ultimate bad guy in this regard. But certainly the secretary already tries to take some of that burden. But yeah, I mean, we have to appreciate the fact that sometimes more is actually less, and we have to be mindful of that. And also the decision is based on relevance, relation to the topic, the involvement of others, etc. So a couple of criteria like this. I mean, the sessions itself, as far as the side events and other events are concerned, this is entirely in the hands of the organizers, and this is why I was talking about the share fair, because for many years there was an exhibition on the atrium. FAO printed 35 posters, and that was nicely arranged, but put there. This is a little bit static, so we can do something else. When we tried the share fair 4 years ago, that worked quite well, and that was new and exciting and more dynamic. So that's why the invitation that, okay, let's innovate, guys. The COFO sessions, it's a little bit trickier, because this is an intergovernmental negotiation which has its own rules. So that rules we cannot bend. This is conducted, I mean, the orchestration is the same. What we can do is certainly make the presentations as good as possible, and that's why, remember, we always used to have these dry runs and everything, because there is one thing that I want to tell everything, there's another thing what people want to hear, and then somehow we need to bring those two into sync. And then we tried a couple of, I think we will, if we will be allowed, we will try again. Last time we did something rather unique, because some of you may remember that we actually rebuilt the Red Room, And we installed an artificial stage there that was the platform for this high-level dialogue. So it was not like here that some boring guys like Andre and myself sitting in a podium and you are listening to that. But there was this stage with the lights, with the chairs and everything, and the atmosphere was, you can look it up on the web stream, was completely different. So we would like, that's why I was talking about the two panels. We would like to try to do that. I hope we will be allowed to do that because it comes at a price and certain approval from the higher authorities here. But I think we can't really go too much beyond that in terms of COFO itself. So innovation and novelties are all for the side events, and there the limits is only the stars.
Okay, I'm making, I guess, my final call to our colleagues that are remotely connected. Please ask your question. If not, I suppose we will, maybe between Dominic and Luigi, we could ask that whatever follow-up questions based on people having had a chance to actually view the recording, they may have questions, so that maybe they send it to both of you, and then we will kind of aggregate them. And
I already received lots of questions, and people are visiting to get some answers. So yeah, they can continue to do that.
Okay, so maybe may I kind of abuse my role of having the mic, and I'm referring to one of the slides that you've shown, which we didn't see in last week in the departmental meeting, which was showing kind of how you start filling the program with these big important, what they're, ovals or ellipses or whatever. Yeah. And the Friday morning one is the big one, which you said, you know, it's a kind of good, a heavy one for us to suggest, or for someone to suggest. And can you maybe clarify what will be the process of actually deciding what shall be the topic there? Because I have some kind of idea that I'm trying maybe to throw at you and others. To what extent, I understand that the COFO, the State of the World's Forest Report, is a statutory kind of item on the agenda, but maybe it will have its own, I don't know, hour or whatever number of time. But maybe if we can also, if we have the liberty of suggesting it's a bigger event, if you could also steer it towards maybe some follow-up after that report, because my sense is that the work that has all been done by so many people across this department and others has a huge potential, the word implications is not the right one, I mean opportunities for us to start building up more strategically in a more integrative way our future work. So if having the report released whenever it is, wherever it is in New York, and then presented at COFO, and maybe if we can go one extra mile or half mile of actually putting our teeth together with the countries and delegates into how we actually use it to move forward. I mean, that would be really, I think, a great idea, but maybe, obviously, there might be limitations as to what we can or cannot propose. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. I mean, so the first, the mechanism, the recommendations are all corrected. I mean, developing a program for the week is really a lengthy exercise. I remember one year when version number 23 was the one that we implemented finally. So there are several iterations there. The recommendations are collected. The secretary tries to mold it into something palatable, and then at the end of the day, this is always an FMT decision, which needs to be then at the very end of the day approved by ODG anyway. But this is the funnel. Regarding COFO itself, I mean, we applied several different methods here. It is always presented at the very beginning of the session, right after the opening ceremony, which is the most prominent place with the highest level of participation, etc. But you're absolutely right, the time is limited. And then in the past we had, sometimes COFO was part of a dialogue, a heads of forestry dialogue right after the introduction of the key findings. Sometimes we had a special event just after that, but outside the COFO session hours, and the discussion was channeled back to the mainstream of the discussion. So there are a number of opportunities here, and then we can have every flexibility to decide on any action in this regard and try to incorporate it in the program. So that's completely open and certainly possible, because indeed the COFO is a big investment, and then 1 hour discussion in the committee is maybe something that is not enough.
Maybe in the spirit of trying for a while to be more or less on time, we're already 7 minutes over our 1 hour allotment. Of course, it's our first such experience, and we may, by trial and error, figure out that 1 hour is by no means enough, and we need 90 minutes for such, future discussions. But for now, let's stick to what we have. Let's see what remaining burning questions are. Again, folks, the Skype connection, folks, make a noise and tell us if you have a question. It's a deafening silence. Maybe internet is gone. I don't know. But let. No. I know. I'm just saying that they're still not. Oh. Okay. We are happy that you're okay, Magnus. That's great. Thank you. Okay. Any last question from the floor here? Okay, no questions. So then the kind of the marching orders from, as soon as our brave video recorders will tell us when the video will be available, we will then kind of push it for everyone to know that it's available and people can take a look at it. And then I guess between Dominique and Luigi, you'll kind of push for more questions so that we can really have it not as a one-off thing, but as a process that will be cascading with incrementally increased and broadening participation by all staff. We still have a contest open and running for the COFO slogan. And certainly the prize shall be much sexier than just standing in front of the 200 ministers and saying something. Okay, with this, I think Peter, do you want to? Okay, so we have a promise, which I'm making public now, that the video will be online on Monday, or by Tuesday. So, Peter, I would like you to close it with your kind of forward-looking, inspirational statement. Thank you.
It's more wicked than inspirational, but without saying which week, it's not a big promise to have it ready by Monday. But I assume this is the next one, right? No, so recommendations are always welcome, and Dominic mentioned already there are several. Mailbox is always open, door is always open to please come, write, talk. It's certainly possible, but also we need to be mindful of the organizational structure. So team-related issues should be discussed within the team first, and then we also have these regular team leaders meetings and the FMT to bring these recommendations forward. But for any information items, just a chat about some idea, then please write and come. We're always there, and then it's almost literally true. At least till 8 o'clock, you can come and see me in the evening. So that is the way forward. Thank you.
For this, well, the first one is closed. Let's really thank Peter for the excellent presentation and initial set of interactions. Thanks, everyone. Bye.